an AI that acts like a digital employee, so it can actually take actions, is the main thing. There's a lot of other things behind it, of it having like memory, being able to evaluate itself, but the main thing that really sets it apart from, let's say, like ChatGPT or Claude, is that it could actually control software. You put a prompt in just like an LLM, and that would give it the instructions of like really whatever you want it to do. Same with just prompting ChatGPT. If you say, hey, you're a prospecting agent, I'll usually do like job, goal, context, rules, and steps are some of the main ones that I use, and then just adding more as necessary. Agents are very like goal oriented. They want to complete the goal. Then you can give it some context or also like examples. This is the example of a good answer. So sometimes you can give it like, here's what an input would look like. Here's what a good output looks like. And that helps it a lot. Giving an example of what you actually want it to spit out helps tremendously.
Alrighty, today we are back with another episode of the AI Report Live. This is someone that I kind of got introduced to over LinkedIn and slowly over time have become good friends with. And yeah, I'm super excited for today's conversation because it's one of those words that's on the tip of everyone's tongue right now is AI agents. And a lot of people are eyeing 2025 as this kind of year of AI agents when this space really explodes. So today's guest is Jake George. He is or has built Synthoria Labs so far, is building Agentic Brain. I'm pretty sure they've just announced on LinkedIn. And yeah, welcome to the podcast, Jake.
Yeah, man. Thanks for having me. I was just, I was thinking about it. I was actually talking to Audrey yesterday and I just told her, I was like, I just got to say, thanks so much for introducing me to Liam. I was like, we were like really tight friends now. And she's like, oh, I knew you would be. I talked to him and I was like, oh, him and Jake would get along.
Gotta thank Audrey for that. It's funny as well. Like, I think a couple of years ago when I looked at LinkedIn, I was like, oh, this is really cringy. Like, I never really want to use it. And now some of the people that I am like tightest with is through LinkedIn connections. Do you know what I mean? Like if you're building similar things in the same space, then naturally you're just going to have more to talk about, more to conversate with. Like you're leading in the same direction. So it's really interesting that it can be built from that.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Same sort of way I used to do. I was in a Web3 like blockchain and stuff. And I was like, LinkedIn is this like cringy corporate. I was like, no one on there would be any fun. I was like, everyone would be like uptight and too serious and whatever. But no, to be honest, like I built pretty much most of my business off of LinkedIn and, networking and, doing stuff like this and, meeting other super cool people. So it's like really, really changed my business. And I mean, just made like a ton of good friends as well. So definitely glad that I, got over a cringe mountain there.
It's got to be done. It's got to be done. If you take yourself too seriously, I mean, where are you going to get in life if that's the case? But let's jump into it, right? So I'm just going to ask a bunch of dumb questions, hopefully so we can get to the root of a rather complex thing and understand it in simple terms. All right. So
yeah, I'll just give really dumb answers then if that works.
we'll keep it dumb on both sides here. In simple terms, people are kind of aware what AI is, right? They talk to ChatGPT, they know what LLMs are in general, and people are under some sort of impression of what automation is. But AI agents is this kind of new phrase that's come onto the scene and it's appearing everywhere in newsletters and podcasts on social media. Can you dumb down what an AI agent is?
Yeah. So in the dumbest nutshell, it's like an AI that acts like a digital employee. So it can actually take actions is the main thing. There's a lot of other things behind it, of it having like memory, being able to evaluate itself, make decisions dynamically. But the main thing that really sets it apart from, let's say, like ChatGPT or Claude is that it could actually control software, essentially. It's like most of what we do in our jobs is like we're controlling different softwares, whether that be like a web browser, Excel, Slack, HubSpot, excuse me, whatever it is. So they're able to, because let's say that you go to ChatGPT and then you're like, hey, add this lead to HubSpot. It's going to be like, I can't do that. It's mostly, aside from, you could say, I mean, we're starting to see LLM models become more agentic, as you'll see, like they can Sometimes they can write, they can sometimes run code, they can create images. That's another tool. They can browse the web. So they are connected to a small amount of tools, and they're becoming more and more agentic, especially if you look at something like GPT-01. So you can kind of see if, sort of behind the scenes of like, you give it a prompt, it sort of breaks down the prompt and then answers it in like multiple ways rather than just like question, answer, which has kind of been a limiting factor of LLMs. Is like, they're good for like question, answer, brainstorming, coming up with ideas, but they don't actually really do anything. They live within the site, whether it be Claude, Gemini, ChatGPT. They know a lot of things, and they can be very useful if you're really good at prompting them, but they wouldn't actually do any work. Whereas an agent, think about it like it can actually do work that you would pay an employee to do. So that's really the main benefit. And that's why it's like, I firmly believe is going to be the biggest thing in business going forward into 2025, because salary costs are some of the biggest expenses. So it's like, and if you can even reduce those, like not replace them, but just reduce them by 10, 30, 50%. That's massive for any company.
Yeah. From what I understand, the degree of separation between agents and just LLMs in general, just like ChatGPT or Claude, whatever, right, is it has some access to different tools. It can take actions by itself. Talk to me more about how that actually happens. All right. So if I'm new to agents in general, what websites do I go to kind of get access to different agents, and like what parts of my business can they kind of fit in and start working with immediately?
Yeah. So I would say a couple of good ones. If you're looking to do it, easily, low code, no code, N8N is really good, and Relevance is pretty good. Those are two that it's like you can get into it with no code. So you can just kind of put it together and sort of play around with it. What I like about both of them, and probably more so N8N, is that they have the already written like integrations, you could say, or modules. So let's say, for example, you want to, when I send a message in the Slack channel, when I say, hey, agent, add this to my to-do list, you could connect it to a module of Slack and then a module, let's say Notion. Okay. So then you could interface with the agent through a Slack channel and then give it connections. So let's say like Notion, maybe a web browser, maybe your CRM. And then you can, add and reference data to both of those. So I would say that would be a sort of like simple way to start off with it, like the most basic sorts of agents. You could just do something where it's like a question and answer, where it's like with your own company. So it's like you could add documents that maybe you want to reference from. You could connect a web browser so it can quickly search, maybe your CRM, as well as like Slack, if it can reference the messages in there. And then you can use that as sort of like a company like knowledge bot. I would say that's one of like the most basic, simple uses for it. But that, that would be something you could definitely build without code. And it wouldn't, I would say pretty much anyone could do it. You could probably go on YouTube, find a 30-minute, hour tutorial. There's also, for people that are looking to learn it, the Max from Trigify, if you've ever heard of them, is very good at agents, especially in N8N, and does a lot of like shows like how they're built and stuff like that. So that's definitely a good way that people can get started with them.
Yeah, I've been watching a lot of Greg Eisenberg's content recently, and he's huge on AI agents at the moment as well. And there's lots of like hour-long tutorials of just people building agents like that with a bunch of different tools. So I'd love to kind of break down exactly how an agent works and how it operates. So, for example, how do I connect it to certain tools that I use? How do I connect it to the internet? Talk to me more about like the instructions that you have to give an agent. How do we actually break down like the body of an agent so that it works effectively?
Sure. So at my company, so at Agentic Brain, what it really boils down to, and I definitely get this question a lot of like, how do they work? And it's like code. Like, like I ask my dev team, like, it's like, do you want me to explain each line of Python? But no, I'm just giving you crap. But essentially how it would interface with different softwares through their APIs. So it's a way for it to, it's just a way for it to communicate, like send and receive data between different software to keep it at a very basic level. So that's sort of like the gist of it. In the background, I mean, it's run on code that gets very complex, but the APIs are what allow it to sort of like interface with pretty much any relevant software. It has to be a really sort of like obscure software to not have an API. Like almost anything that you would use nowadays would have it.
Interesting. All right. And talk to me more about roles and instructions to give this agent, because a part of an agent is that it can operate autonomously, right? Is that I don't have to wake up in the morning and be like, agent, go and do this. You can just set it instructions and it will do it naturally. So talk to me more about what instructions are and how to get them right.
Yeah. So at the core of it, even though it's different from an LLM, at its like, let's call it its brain, okay, keep it simple, is an LLM. It'd be like OpenAI, Claude, Gemini. So kind of the LLM is sort of like helping it make these decisions and sort of progress along this task. So maybe it's like, okay, first we need to call this tool. Let's say like check an email, okay? And then based on the information from that, it can then the LLM, it'll be like, okay, I got this data. Now what's the next step? And it can decide going forward. So essentially how that would, you put a prompt in just like an LLM, and that would give it the instructions of like really whatever you want it to do. Same with just prompting ChatGPT of like, if you say, hey, you're a prospecting agent, how I usually break it down is explain like, there's a lot of different frameworks of like role task format. I don't always follow those exactly. I'll usually do like job, goal, context, rules, and steps are some of the main ones that I use, and then just adding more as necessary. So essentially giving it like, here's your main job. Okay, here's what you're supposed to do. You are, let's say, a prospecting agent or something. The goal, the end goal of what you're trying to accomplish. Like here, there's a job, which you do along the way, but then there's also the end goals, and their agents are very like goal oriented. They want to complete the goal. So you got to give it like, this is achievement. Okay. Then you can give it some context of like, here's relevant data that you might need to know to complete this task. Or also like examples, which is sort of similar to context of like, this is the example of a good answer. So sometimes you can give it like, here's what an input would look like. Here's what a good output looks like. And that helps it a lot just for LLMs in general. Giving an example of what you actually want it to spit out, like helps tremendously. Then rules, typically, in the better that LLM models get, the fewer rules you need. Like back in GPT 3.5, it's like my rule list was like this long because it's always doing like stupid things. You're like, oh, I don't know, like retrieve this sort of data. And it just like goes off and like does something like irrelevant. And it's like, no, don't do that thing. Don't do this thing. Don't do this thing. So it's like the whole list of just like, do not do this sort of thing. So rules is kind of like things that aren't explicitly obvious within the job description and goal, and just giving it certain parameters. And then steps is a good way to sort of guide it, because you get a more consistent, when you take a logical process, because it's doing things that humans can do, it's using software to achieve some sort of goal. And, obviously the person that is programming it needs to understand how that process works. You don't just say like, hey, go get me some leads, and it does it. It's not that smart. So you would break down your logical process of like, what would I actually do to achieve the goal? Like, oh, first go search on LinkedIn, then read all these profiles, see who fits within these parameters. If they do fit in these parameters, send them to my CRM and write them a personalized message, something like that. You break it down into a lot of different steps. So that helps with like the consistency of getting it to perform the task in the way that you want.
I mean, I think that's where a lot of people go wrong with AI in general, right? Is that they just assume because AI is very intelligent right now that they can just be very broad with it and it's going to provide the result that they want, right? But realistically, just think of it as a human being. If you bring on a new human being, for example, they're in the sales department and you say, go find me leads, they're going to be like, well, what leads, under what parameters, from what businesses, to do what, and where do you want me to put them, and what format, and how do you want me to follow up with them? It's the same as training any employee, right? It's like you need to define exactly what you want, and once you do that, then you can actually train the agent to do exactly that. What you mentioned is the two things I want to clarify. One, you said the brain is made up of the LLM itself, right? I'm assuming you have the ability to choose what LLM you run that brain on, right? And then two, you said the actual instructions of how this is run. So if we imagine the brain's there, you have the API codes to access different programs, whether that be LinkedIn or Slack or HubSpot, stuff like that. That's how it gets access to things. And then three, you said it's coded specifically on Python. Is that correct? Or is it a mixture of programming languages that these act on?
It is a mixture of programming, and this gets very technical. A lot there's a lot of it done on Python. We use a lot of different Python libraries to create agents, because there's a lot of like when we're when you're writing software, you usually don't just like start from complete scratch. It's like you're using like, a lot of pre-built libraries and stuff. And this is something that, if you want my CTO McLovin on, and he can ramble off some words that you and I will never understand in the rest of our lives, there's certainly a much higher level explanation of it. But Python is definitely a main one that we are using, yes, but not the only one.
For someone that's not technical, why is Python used? Is that more aligned with the ability to take autonomous actions? Like, why structurally is Python used?
Again, that one gets pretty technical. I wouldn't say that there's a very basic answer for that. It's very commonly used. I wouldn't say that I know the exact technicalities of how Python works on the back end to say exactly why it's the best for that. Again, this is something that I just leave to my CTO and development team.
Got you. Okay. So right now, let's take things back a step. All right. We kind of understand what an agent is now. We understand that the brain is made up of the LLM. You have access to different programs, including the internet through APIs, and it's structured based on Python. Currently, right now, your experience with agents, you have been coding them with some degree of technical experience so far. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Do you foresee a future, and are we currently at a stage where people can build AI agents without any coding experience at all?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's one of the coolest things about, kind of where we are now is something that not just agents, but LLMs in general are very good at is development, writing code. I mean, we're compared to like when I used to run my blockchain development team and there weren't really so many AI tools to help out. We are so much more efficient. Like we're probably 5 to 10 times more on the development side efficient there. Just absolutely just cook through, just fly. We use, have you ever heard of Devin?
Yes, you were telling me about this.
Yeah. So it's like let's just say in a nutshell, coding agent. Okay. And it pretty much will, autonomously go. It can, fix bugs. It can write code, and it will automatically fix them within GitHub for you. So we're leveraging that. We're also using Cursor, which is like an AI powered IDE. So again, it's just like it's just making everything so much more efficient. We're leveraging like all the most like cutting edge AI tools, for our dev team, which is, realistically at the end of the day, writing most of the code. You still definitely need someone experienced to sort of like pilot these tools. So I wouldn't say like at this moment, I wouldn't say that you could go in with completely zero knowledge and put it all together. Possibly if you really sit down and spend a lot of time with like, say, ChatGPT or Claude and really try to understand, like starting from like a, 1,000-foot view of just like, okay, how would I code an agent? Okay, what software would I need to install? How would I, set up the framework? Like what packages, and you really walk through it. I would say, yes, it's possible. At this point, if you're a little bit technical, you definitely could. I would say that just at this point, someone without knowledge in AI is not ever really going to outperform someone with like a computer science degree. Just off the bat, that can definitely, I mean, the tools are getting better every day. Like with Devin, I mean, it's like, it does it for you. Like you have to direct Devin somewhat, but it's a very much sort of done for you sort of agent. So I would say yes, in the future, I think that I'd say even now, it's like you can use things like no code tools, like I was saying, like N8N or Relevance. And using those, you can build agents without code, although it is obviously coded by their teams on the back end. And they're just giving you a very nice UI to put stuff together. But also using AI powered coding tools and LLMs, you could definitely create one on your own if you really had enough technical knowledge to understand, what it's saying to you, and kind of go back and forth and, learn a little bit and then put it all together, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, from all of the content that I've been consuming, right, it's just a matter of being patient enough to sit down and understand the degrees of complexity and how these different puzzle pieces fit together, right? We're now at a point where the majority of the technical coding and stuff can be handled for you, but you still have to understand how these pieces fit together, how APIs work, and like how all these pieces are going to fit together to actually have a functional product. So my natural question beyond that as well is like, if we're already a space where the majority of coding is pretty damn good, right? We can understand where it's at. It's only going to get better, right? With the new OpenAI models and different models. What becomes the most important or the most valuable skill set? Whereas like developers were getting paid 400K, are getting paid 400K just now, right? And the majority of that work can be done. Is the future more about the people with the big ideas, right, who can fit that into a landscape that it works? Like, is it all about product managers now?
Yeah, I mean, understanding the process, like I was saying, like someone who knows nothing using AI is not going to outperform like computer science major. Like it's just very unlikely to happen. You would definitely have to spend a lot of time to know what you're doing. And this is kind of one of the misconceptions of AI that we briefly went over, that because it's AI, it knows everything. So therefore, if I use AI, I'm just as good as anyone who's a professional at whatever they're doing. And it's just like, that's just not the case currently. You just need to understand like an AI can be applied to so many different industries and tasks. Like it just depends on like what you're doing with it. It's like if you're developing an AI to like spot cancer early, something like that. I mean, that's a very high level, extremely technical. But you would have to know, if you're building that, you need to be like a doctor that knew how to spot cancer. Because you don't just throw in and prompt it, hey, find cancer early for me. And it'd be like, it's not really clear. So you would have to like, the best way that would be made would be, in, what would you say? Made along with very skilled doctors who understand the process of how you'd go about identifying that. Same thing with like, let's say we're using AI for sales. You need to understand what a good sales process is. You need to understand like why the current one might be broken, where you can make it more efficient. And also a lot of places, understanding where not to use AI is just as important as understanding where to use AI. Because if you're just like, oh, I'm just going to slap it on everything, use every AI tool that I can, and think that you're like, this brilliant person creating this totally automated system, but it's like none of the pieces work well together. The system itself doesn't really work. So it's like, because agents can be trained to do about anything, but it's like if you train them on a crap process, it's going to be a crap agent. If you train it on a good process, it's going to be good. It's like garbage in, garbage out. So I'd say that it's more about like what I would say is going to be the most important and what AI can never replace is the people skills. It's just like what you and I are doing right now. Like why are we friends? Not because we had our agents coordinate to set us up on a podcast and whatever. It's like, no, because like we resonate on a bunch of stuff, and it's like, we built a relationship. So it's just like that's something, and I specifically see this in the sales process a lot, because it's like sales is built on like relationships and trust. It's not, AI cannot replace that. It can do a lot of stuff on the back end that takes a lot of your time, like the admin work, the stuff that doesn't require any relationship building or emotional intelligence. But so I guess in a nutshell, I would say like understanding the process of what you want AI to do is very important. Being an expert in your field and understanding what you want to automate, and then how to automate and how the process works. And then having just excellent people skills, relationship building. You just can't replace that with a robot.
Yeah, I mean, two things I really want to extrapolate from what you just said there is, one, we're going to notice this widening gap, right? Because people that have been brought up to conceptualize and understand the process of operations, marketing, agents, coding and stuff are going to be a significant advantage compared to kids that are kind of like graduating high school and university just now, because they've never had to understand the process themselves and they're just using AI to do the process. They don't actually understand the underlying thing, right? So there's going to be this widening gap of people that have spent enough time and had enough patience to learn the process manually so that they can actually utilize this technology. That's going to be really interesting. Second part as well is I think a lot of people's fear about AI is that we're going to lose this human connection, right? Like this ability to connect with other people, which is going to be a bunch of robots connected with a bunch of robots. But I really do think it's going to be the opposite way around, and that a bunch of the manual labor and things we don't want to do and things that's just admin of us just talking to a laptop is going to be handled by AI, which leaves more time for us to actually have human conversations, to do podcasts, to be part of a community, because all of the manual automated stuff that we don't want to do is handled for us, right? And we're already seeing this. Like something that I seen today is the state of Arizona recently introduced a bill where there's certain schools that will do 2 hours of AI learning a day. So they'll do this because basically different students have different processes of learning, different rates of learning. So they spend 2 hours with AI a day. It's actually made them doubly as efficient as they used to be just from like learning in a classroom. And then the rest of the day is spent with humans learning more important life skills. How do I file my taxes? How do I do this? How do I open a credit card? What does this mean? How do I fit in the world? How do I develop my social skills? So I think AI is going to have an opposite reaction from what people think it's going to have. Anyways, that's beside the point, right? I could ramble on about this for hours, the hypotheticals of it. What I want to bring things back to is the business that you've just launched, Agentic Brain. Tell me a bit more about the founding of this. Why was it founded? How did you find your co-founder, and what do you guys do?
Actually, so funny enough, another LinkedIn story. I met my co-founder Frank through LinkedIn, just through posting content. He reached out. He was interested in agents. So to give you a bit of background, so he's been a fractional CRO for 15 years, been in sales for like over 20. Worked with a lot of like private equity and VCs. So they would, they buy up like whatever, like 9 different companies. And then they're like, okay, you're the CRO for each of these companies. You would go and then scale the sales teams and train them. And then, once it's operating, not on autopilot, but once it has a great sales process, it's starting to, give them an ROI, then he'd go on to the next one, and he just built, tons and tons of sales teams. So he really understands the sales process extremely well. And has been, since like GPT-3, since before it had like public access, has been, trying to integrate it into the sales process as much as possible. However, doesn't really have a technical background, which is more of where then I came in, because that's what we were already doing at Synthoria Labs. So it kind of just became a combination of, we started working on like, she's like, I think the agents are definitely the future. I don't really know how to build them, but I know a ton about sales, and I know what things that I would build with an agent. So you just kind of like, spitball ideas like, oh, it'd be really cool if there's an agent that does this sort of thing. And I was like, oh yeah, I could do that. And I would just like sit there and I'd make it, or have the devs make it depending on the complexity. And then the next day be like, okay, here's the agent. And he's just like, oh, whoa, no way. So we would just keep, building these agents and stuff. He's like, wow, this would be so useful for my clients. And so then he's like, what if we just sort of like combine our companies in a way and then form Agentic Brain? And it worked well, because the biggest thing at Synthoria Labs that I was finding is that people would come in, they'd be like, I want an AI for sales. And it's like, what does that mean? Like, essentially what they mean, I want an AI to run my entire sales department and just make me $1 million. And it's like, oh yes, I do have the money printing AI agent. And I would love to give it to you for, how about $1,000? Rather than me run the agent myself and make $1 million, how about I just give it to everyone else at a super low cost? Because that totally makes sense. So it was just like a lot of learning on my side in the past, year and a half, 2 years in the AI space, and kind of seeing like where the problems are. And a lot of it came down to, you have a really broken sales process. So it's like, yes, I can automate a lot of this, but it's not actually going to. Then they're like, well, how much, like what you like, they wanted like a guaranteed like ROI. And I was like, look, like it doesn't like, it would go in there and automate this. I was like, it would work as well as your sales process, except the main metric that we focus on is like talk time. So giving your salespeople more talk time. The more time that they're on the phone closing, the better that you're going to do. But again, it's just like, dude, if your process is broken, your sales team is garbage. Like, I can't guarantee that it's not going to make them better. It's just going to take out a lot of the work that they do. So that was one of the main things that I noticed, and one of the main problems that, I kind of run into. So now a combination of Frank on the sales side. So we do a mix of like sales and AI consulting along with the custom development and implementation. And that's where we're really seeing the most success, is rather than, relying on the client of like to know what they want automated, because it's like they don't even know most of the time why their sales process is broken. So usually it starts off with like the consultation aspect of like, here's all the areas that it's lacking. And so we're going to help them fix the sales process. And while we're doing that along the way, a lot of the things that need to be fixed, like for, let's say, a very basic example, sending follow-ups after sales calls. So many people do not do it. And it's kind of funny too. I was just on a call with a larger notable AI sales tool company, and to work out a partnership. And the whole thing, and they're showing us like, oh yeah, and our AI, it automatically has this where, it'll follow up here and take the details from our call, yada, yada, yada. Craziest thing, they didn't follow up. They never sent me the details. And I was just like, bro, like you sat here for half an hour showing me what a good sales tool does, how it follows up, how it does all this, and you never followed up. Like how, it just doesn't make any sense. It's like your AI is so great, but it didn't follow up, nor did you. So it's like, you must not understand very well that. Anyways, aside from that, so it's just like something so basic like that. But we use AI to do that. Like I don't sit there typing out these follow-up emails because it kind of becomes a pain. So something like that, where it's like you fix the things like that. We do the consulting, improve the sales process, and then we integrate AI along with how we are helping them fix it, because there's a lot of more basic agents and automations in sales that are just general good practices that can be applied to pretty much almost any B2B company. And then they'll start to see that, efficiency increase. So we fix their process. The process is better, maybe giving them some sales coaching or help them find better salespeople if, sometimes they're lacking there. But then along the way, we're helping them build out their sales process, implementing AI in there. So the actual process takes 30 to 50% less time and manual effort than it would have, let's say, 4 or 5 years ago. So then it's like they're getting that much more talk time and they're closing that much more. So that's really kind of like the beauty of like the intersection where like the consulting, the process, and the AI all have to work together.
Yeah. Let's jump into, from what I understand, the two things you're sorting is first quality and then quantity, right? First, you're fixing that process. That's the quality of it. That's why you've got your co-founder there. He's like, this is broken. You should be doing this as best practice. And once you've done that, is quantity, right? How do we have more outreach? How do we have more quality outreach? How do we book more calls so we can have more talk time, right? It's the basics of it. Let's take an example. We have the newsletter. We sell ads on a newsletter, right? Kyle, our current salesperson, he sends out ad campaigns on HubSpot. And from there, he books calls, he books them in, and then he has to kind of put that data in the CRM. He has to follow up with them, book in ads. Talk to me about, like, if we were to do a live example, how would you sell Agentic Brain to me? What would you do for us?
So how I would fix the process rather than giving you a whole sales pitch and stuff, because in the sales pitch, you don't get technical. You don't actually talk about AI. But if you want to know about how fixing the problem, more in my area of expertise on the technical side is that I would say, so he's putting out ads. There's some sort of lead form. He has to book them into calls. So you could improve this in a few ways. Let's say someone fills out the form. Okay. I would say collect their some identifying like their LinkedIn or something like that. An agent could automatically then go qualify them and score them. So it can say like, because let's say like let's say I'm not your target demographic and I just, this sounds super cool. I fill out the form. You could have a call with me. I might waste your time for half an hour to an hour just asking, will you put me in your newsletter or whatever. You're like, no, screw off, whatever. So you can have it automatically qualify and score leads based on your parameters. So it could automatically, someone fills out the form, it goes and checks their LinkedIn, it researches their company, it looks online, and then says either they're qualified or not qualified, but then also gives them a score on how good of a fit they are, depending on what your parameters are. Maybe you're looking for, let's say, specifically enterprise B2B SaaS, something like that. But you're like, oh, we would also do like SMB AI companies that are not a SaaS. Like, let's say for me, example, more of an agency model. Like, maybe we'd also do that, but they're more like a 6 to us rather than a 10. You can score them. You can automatically have that all added to the CRM. You could then increase the speed to lead, making sure that the best leads, like let's say that they're over a 5, you could automatically have an agent then reach out to them or call them. You could have them leave their phone number or email or WhatsApp or anything. It could call and or text or email them or send a message on LinkedIn, whatever contact that they've left. So through that, you can get your speed to lead down. It can immediately qualify them in a couple seconds, send out a message to the ones that are qualified and be like, hey, saw you just filled out the form. Then let's say the next step that you need to ask a few more qualifying questions that are not actually listed on their website or LinkedIn. So let's say then immediately it calls them and it's like, hey, this is Liam from Upscale. I saw you just filled out the form, just checked out your website and everything. And it looks like you'd be a great fit. I just got a few questions for you to make sure that this will work well for both of us. Boom, 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 boom. That's about the extent that I would use an AI, especially a voice agent, to sell. They're not even selling, they're qualifying, because that's the thing is that a lot of people get this other misconception that it's like, I want an AI voice agent that just closes deals for me or something like that. AI does not sell. It does not sell anything high ticket, but it could call you up. Just, here's the qualifying questions. Boom, 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 boom. If you answer well, then it'd be like, great, looks awesome. Let's book you in for a call with real Liam for next week. Checks the calendar. Okay, checks for when you're open next week. Hey, how about Tuesday at 12 p.m.? Does that work for you? And then yes or no. Awesome, great. Look forward to talking then. So from there, you already have a pre-qualified and scored lead with all of the data in the CRM. So then your salesperson can essentially, all that work is then done for them. They can just sit there just like, oh, here's my calls for today. I got 15 calls, just boom, 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 boom. Just talk time like all day.
Awesome. Talk to me one step back. For example, you mentioned the form at the start, right? To get people in and scoring leads. Take me one step behind that as well. Say, for example, we wanted to run an automation that would find any company that's raised funding in the tech industry in the past 3 months and automatically find the contacts for them and email them, and maybe any other contact that had placed an advertisement in other AI newsletters in the past 6 months. Are AI agents able to do that part of the process as well?
In a nutshell, yes. It would come down to like that data is online. So let's say you're looking for companies with funding. You would look for then a data provider that provides
Crunchbase, for example.
Yep. That would work. Yep. And you would just use their API. You can then you can look for a company, search it, and the agent can search it on Crunchbase via the API, search if they have funding. As for a newsletter, that might take a little bit more dynamic. Like that might require maybe you go and start by looking at their LinkedIn page. If I had looked at like AI tool report, I could probably figure out that, an agent could easily figure out that there was a newsletter. And then, the next step is then going, okay, let's pull their company website, go to their website. Okay, boom, we can find that they have a newsletter. So, and you can have it research as deep or as many steps as you want. So essentially just like where you would pull the data from, like you as a human, where would you find the data on if they have funding? Probably Crunchbase. Connect Crunchbase to the agent. How would I find if you have a newsletter? Well, I'd probably start looking at your company page. Then I'd go to your website. Maybe I'd look at the founders pages. Those are all sorts of things. Also, an agent can find. You connect it to LinkedIn, connect it to a web browser. It can then go and search out those things. And let's say that you have 1,000 companies that you want to qualify in this way. You yourself or hiring someone can go 1, 2, 3. Each one takes 5, 10 minutes or so. Agent 1,000 at once. 2 minutes later, they're all done. And then you just have qualified, scored, added to CRM. So you could very quickly, if you take a large list, it can run all of them in series rather than in parallel or wrong way.
But we should end up doing this conversation on like a bi-weekly basis, because there's obviously going to be so many developments happening in AI and the general space as well. So we'll definitely run back another episode of this new year. I think you're going to be like, if we imagine a TV show, like you're the Kramer, I think, so far. You're in every third episode, maybe. So let's run with that for the new year. But Jake, I want to say thank you again for your time, mate. I really appreciate it. For people that want to kind of find more about you and about what you do and about Agentic Brain, how do they get in touch?
I would say my LinkedIn, which I would imagine you'll put in the description somewhere, and then also my website, agenticbrain.com. No, I'm not going to leave it there. No contact.
No, I'll put my own LinkedIn instead.
Yeah. Okay, on LinkedIn, Jake George, Agentic Brain, www.agenticbrain.com. Ignore whatever Liam puts in the description. It's all hogwash. Well, thanks for having me again. It's been a joy. And yeah, looking forward to doing more of these.
A pleasure, Jake. A pleasure. Thank you.